Breaking news has come through in the very early morning hours at around 2 house a.m., and what we're learning is quite significant. The confirmation and approval of the $2,000 tariff rebate checks has now become official. Just a short time ago, something happened that took both Washington and millions of everyday Americans completely by surprise. The White House has confirmed that a major decision was made late at night, and this is something that nobody saw coming. In a move that has never really happened before in quite this way, the president has officially given his approval and signed off on the updated and revised structure of these $2,000 tariff rebate checks. What had been weeks and weeks of people wondering and speculating about whether this would actually happen has now turned into confirmed and actual policy that is moving forward. This was not the kind of announcement that anyone would call routine or ordinary. There was no primetime press conference held for the cameras. There was no extended briefing with reporters asking questions back and forth. There was no early warning given to the general public about what was about to be announced. Instead of all that, the confirmation of this decision came very quietly through internal notifications that were sent within the Treasury Department. These are the kinds of notifications and communications that usually do not make their way to the surface or become public unless something has already been fully decided upon and is already being set into motion and prepared for rollout. For seniors all across the country, and especially for those seniors who are living day to day on fixed incomes that do not change from month to month, this particular moment carries far more significance than it might appear to carry at first glance or at first hearing. Because when you look behind the headlines that people will see, and when you look behind the silence and the quiet way this was handled, something genuinely meaningful has shifted in how this program is being designed and who it will prioritize. The original design and structure of this program had been focused very largely on workers and on middle-income households that have been affected by the rising tariffs that have been put in place. But the internal documents that were released overnight, the ones that are now becoming available for people to review, reveal something very different from what was originally planned. There has been a quiet restructuring that has taken place, and this restructuring finally recognizes and acknowledges what so many older Americans have been feeling for months and months now. The tariff rebate program itself is funded through revenue that has been collected from import tariffs, and it is not funded through traditional stimulus legislation like some of the programs we have seen in the past. And that particular distinction actually matters much more than most people might realize at first. What it means in practical terms is that these payments do not require a brand new vote to take place in Congress. Once the eligibility categories are finalized and agreed upon, the Treasury Department has the legal authority that it needs to move forward with the program. And according to officials who are familiar with the process and who have knowledge of what happened, the president gave his approval to a revised eligibility framework late in the evening after he had reviewed one very painful truth that could not be ignored. That truth is this: inflation has hit older Americans harder than it has hit almost anyone else in the country. For more than 10 years now, there has been a strong focus on helping seniors navigate their retirement decisions, on helping them protect their savings that they have worked so hard to build, and on helping them feel more confident and secure about their future. There is a deep and genuine care for providing clarity, especially when something this important happens so quietly in the middle of the night, without much explanation being given to the public. The goal here is straightforward and simple: to help you understand exactly what has changed, why it matters so much, and what it could possibly mean for you personally, and to do all of this without creating fear, without adding to confusion, and without making false promises that cannot be kept. So let us go through this step by step in a calm and clear way so that you can really understand what is happening. What happened overnight was not just the simple confirmation of a $2,000 payment being approved. The more important shift, the one that really matters, happened behind the scenes where most people cannot see it. Treasury officials took the time to review new economic reports that had been prepared, and those reports showed something that most seniors already know deep in their hearts and have been experiencing in their daily lives. Fixed incomes simply do not stretch the way they used to stretch even just a few years ago. Groceries cost significantly more than they did before. Utilities cost more every single month. Prescription medications keep costing more and more with each refill. Even small increases in prices feel incredibly heavy and burdensome when your income does not rise to match those increases. While many working households can adjust over time by working extra hours or finding additional income, seniors very often cannot do that. They are working with what they have, and that amount stays the same month after month. And for the first time since this program has been discussed and debated, that reality has been placed front and center in the decision decision-making process. Instead of treating seniors as just one more group standing in a long line of people who need help, the revised structure is beginning to move those seniors who have the least financial flexibility closer to the front of that line. This change was not rolled out with fanfare and big announcements because it was not designed to be political theater or a show for the cameras. It was a technical and administrative green light, the kind of signal that shows movement from just having conversations to actually executing and implementing a plan. Because this particular program is funded through tariff revenue that already exists and has already been collected, Treasury officials did not need to build an entirely new system from the ground up. What they needed to do was adjust the priorities of who gets reviewed and processed first. And that is exactly what has happened with this overnight decision. The decision that came through so quietly in those early morning hours was not about promising the world to everyone or making grand declarations. It was about acknowledging vulnerability where it exists, recognizing genuine need when it is identified, and reshaping the order in which relief applications and cases are reviewed and processed. For seniors who are living on Social Security benefits or on supplemental security income or on disability benefits, that shift in priority matters tremendously. It means that your situation is finally being seen and recognized, not as an afterthought that gets pushed to the back, but as something that deserves careful and thoughtful attention right from the start. Over the next several minutes, we are going to have a conversation about what this shift really means in practical terms, about who may be affected by these changes, about what you should do next, and equally important, what you should not do next, and about how to stay calm and prepared while everything continues to move forward behind the scenes in government offices. The job here is not to push fear or to create hype about something that may or may not happen exactly as described. The job is to help you feel informed, to help you feel steady, and to help you feel supported throughout this entire process, because you genuinely deserve clarity and you deserve peace of mind during uncertain times. As the details from the internal briefing slowly became clearer and started to emerge, one theme kept showing up again and again throughout all of the documents and discussions. Older Americans were carrying significantly more financial pressure than the original program had accounted for or had planned around. Across every single report that was reviewed, seniors consistently showed much higher levels of financial stress, and they had far less room to adapt or adjust to changing circumstances. Rising grocery prices were not just inconvenient for them or a minor annoyance. They were actually forcing very difficult choices between buying healthy food that keeps them well and buying cheaper substitutes that do not provide the same nutrition. Utility increases were not just frustrating expenses to complain about. They were pushing people to turn the air conditioner off even during hot weather, to stretch heating oil as far as it would possibly go, or to try to conserve electricity in ways that affected their basic comfort and even their health. And medical costs, including copays for doctor visits, prescriptions that must be filled regularly, and various treatments, all continued creeping upward in small but absolutely relentless steps that never seemed to stop. For someone who is living on a fixed benefit check that arrives every month with the same amount, those little increases in costs stack up extremely fast. And what truly stood out to the economists who were reviewing all of this data was something simple but incredibly powerful. Seniors do not have the same ability that younger people have to replace lost income or to absorb surprise expenses when they come up. A worker who is still employed can sometimes pick up extra hours at their job, negotiate for higher pay, or find part-time work on the side to make ends meet, but most retirees simply cannot do those things. Their budget is already carefully balanced down to the last dollar, and there is not much left that they can cut without causing serious hardship. That economic reality is what ultimately triggered the review that led to these changes. The White House and Treasury Department were presented with updated figures that showed a widening gap between costs that seniors face and the benefits they receive, particularly for those who are receiving smaller monthly Social Security amounts. The analysis showed something quite troubling when all the numbers were put together. While inflation was touching nearly everyone in the country in one way or another, seniors who were living on limited benefits felt it immediately and felt it deeply in ways that others might not experience. They were not spending money on luxuries or unnecessary things. They were simply trying to stay afloat and cover their basic needs. And when policymakers sat down and actually saw that data laid out in front of them, they realized that the original plan had unintentionally pushed many seniors toward the end of the line when they should have been closer to the front. Quietly and without a lot of public discussion, the conversation shifted among those making the decisions. Instead of asking the question, who is included in this program, the new question became, who has the least room to recover if we make them wait longer? That small but significant change in thinking is what moved seniors out of the background, where they had been, and toward the center of the conversation where they needed to be. From years of experience sitting across the table from retirees and hearing their stories, this does not come as a surprise to anyone who has been paying attention. People stretch their prescriptions to make them last longer. Grocery lists get pared down to the bare minimum of what is absolutely needed. And there is this quiet worry that you can hear in people's voices when unexpected bills show up in the mail. Seniors rarely complain loudly or make a big fuss about their struggles. Instead, they adjust as best they can, they endure what they must endure, and they try very hard not to trouble anyone or be seen as a burden to their families or communities. But the economic reality of what they are going through eventually shows up in the numbers and the data that cannot be ignored. And that is exactly what happened in this particular case with this program. The revised approval structure was not designed to reward one group over another group or to play favorites with certain populations. It was designed specifically to recognize vulnerability where it exists and to respond to that vulnerability in an appropriate and meaningful way. And once that vulnerability became impossible to ignore any longer, real change followed as a natural and necessary result. Now, as Treasury officials began the work of reshaping the program from the ground up, they did not simply add seniors to an existing list that was already in place and call it done. Instead, they made the decision to rebuild the entire review process itself. Instead of treating every household exactly the same way, regardless of their individual circumstances, they introduced what they are calling a tier system for processing applications and reviews. This was not done to complicate things unnecessarily or to make the process more confusing for people to understand, but rather to make absolutely sure that the people who are feeling the most financial pressure are no longer stuck waiting behind those who have more flexibility and more options available to them in their daily lives. In the original design that was first proposed and discussed, priority leaned very heavily toward working households that were directly affected by tariffs on goods they purchase. This initial focus existed because policymakers assumed that those families would experience the fastest economic shock from rising prices and would need help first and most urgently. But the new data that came in from various economic studies painted a quite different picture of what was actually happening on the ground in real households. Seniors, and especially low income seniors living on fixed government benefits, were being squeezed more tightly and more quickly than anyone had expected them to be when the program was first being designed. So the model and the entire approach were adjusted significantly to reflect that reality and those findings. In simple terms that anyone can understand without needing an economics degree, here is what changed with the new structure that is now in place. Without getting into any technical jargon that would be confusing or overwhelming, Treasury officials created what they are calling priority lanes for reviewing and processing cases. The first lane is specifically designed for households that have the least purchasing power and the smallest financial cushion to fall back on when unexpected expenses arise. That first lane now includes many seniors who rely mainly on Social Security, supplemental security income, or disability benefits as their primary and often only source of income each month. These cases will move through the review process faster than others in different lanes, not because the people in them are somehow more deserving than anyone else or more important, but because the system now recognizes and acknowledges that these households feel the impact of inflation sooner, and they have fewer options available to them when prices rise. The second lane still includes millions of households across the country who qualify for the program and will receive help. But their review may take somewhat longer simply because their financial position gives them slightly more room to absorb rising costs without facing immediate crisis or hardship. A third lane exists specifically for situations that need extra verification steps or involve higher incomes that require additional scrutiny and documentation before approval can be given. What matters most in all of this restructuring is this simple but important fact. Seniors are no longer automatically placed at the end of the line like they have been in the past with similar programs. The restructuring does not guarantee instant payments to anyone regardless of their situation, and it does not mean that everyone will be treated identically in every single way or receive money on the same day. But what it does mean, and this is what really matters most, is that the system now looks at real-world impact and real-world circumstances that people are actually facing rather than just making broad assumptions about who needs help, first based on employment status alone. If your income is fixed and does not change from month to month, if your monthly benefit check is truly your lifeline to survival and paying bills, and if rising prices are leaving you with painful choices between necessities like food and medicine, then the updated approach is specifically designed to recognize that situation sooner rather than making you wait at the back of a long line. And while this change happened very quietly, without fanfare or press conferences, it represents something genuinely important and meaningful. An acknowledgement, finally, that financial stability in retirement should not feel like a constant fight that never ends or a daily struggle just to get by. As the revised structure became clearer and more details emerged over the following hours, many seniors began asking the same quiet question that was on everyone's mind. Where exactly do I fit in all of this new system? And that is absolutely a fair and reasonable question to ask. What is important for people to understand clearly is that the Treasury Department did not create just a single, narrow doorway that only a few people can fit through at a time. Instead, they looked carefully at patterns of real lives being lived, real budgets being managed, and real vulnerability that people are experiencing every single day across the country. The strongest early priority appears to lean towards seniors who rely mainly on federal benefits as their primary source of income to live on each month. That includes people whose household income is built mostly around Social Security benefits, supplemental security income payments, disability benefits, or survivor's benefits that come from a deceased spouse or partner. These are households where every single dollar that comes in already has a specific job assigned to it before it even arrives in the bank account, and where unexpected price increases do not simply squeeze the budget a little bit or create minor inconvenience. They erase the breathing room entirely and leave people with nothing left over for emergencies or unexpected needs. Internal guidance that has been shared among Treasury staff suggests that many of the most vulnerable seniors fall under roughly $30,000 per year in total household income from all sources combined. But income alone is not the full story anymore, with this new approach that takes multiple factors into account. Treasury officials began weighing something deeper and more nuanced than just the number that appears on a tax form at the end of the year. They began looking carefully at the concept of stability and flexibility. If your income is fixed, predictable from month to month without variation, and does not have any room to grow or increase through additional work or other means, then the model recognizes that you feel inflation very differently from someone who can still increase their earnings over time through employment or business opportunities. So, with everything that we have talked about and covered together in this conversation, the natural question becomes this: what should you actually do right now in practical terms? And the answer, thankfully, is actually quite simple and straightforward without requiring complicated steps. The most important step that you can take right now is making sure that your information in government systems is accurate and up to date. If you have an online IRS account set up, or if you use the My Social Security portal website, take just a few minutes when you have the chance to log in and make sure that your mailing address and your direct deposit information are current and correct. Small errors like an old address that you do not live at anymore, a closed bank account that is no longer active, or even just a simple typo in an account number are very often the primary reason that payments get delayed significantly or get rerouted to the wrong place entirely, causing frustration and worry. If something needs updating or correcting in your records, do it directly inside those official government systems where your information is stored and maintained. There is no need to rush or panic about doing this immediately within the next hour, but staying ahead of those small but important details can save you weeks and weeks of waiting later on when payments actually start going out to people across the country. As we come to a close in this conversation, something must be said directly from the heart. Over the past several years, so many seniors across this country have carried the weight of rising costs with quiet strength and dignity that often goes unrecognized. You have stretched budgets as far as they could possibly go and then found ways to stretch them even further. You have made difficult sacrifices that your families may not even know about or fully understand. You have worried silently, sometimes without telling your children or your friends what you are really going through, because you did not want to be seen as a burden to anyone or cause them concern. This update and this change in how the program works does not solve everything that needs to be solved or erase all financial challenges, but it is a meaningful acknowledgement that your challenges are real and that you should not always be placed last in line when help is being distributed to those who need it. That acknowledgement matters deeply and should not be dismissed. You deserve to live with dignity in your later years. You deserve financial stability in your retirement that you worked so hard to reach. And you deserve clear information instead of living with confusion and fear about what might happen next or being left in the dark. If this conversation has helped you feel even a little more grounded, a little more confident about what is happening, or a little more prepared for what may come, then that is a true reward. And that makes all of this work worthwhile. That is exactly why this kind of information sharing is done and why it is so important to provide clear explanations. And before you go, consider for a moment the wisdom that you carry from all of your years of experience and life lessons. What is one money lesson you wish you had learned sooner in your life? Something practical you think might genuinely help someone else who is facing similar challenges or just starting their financial journey. Your story and your experience may be exactly what another person out there needs to hear right now to make better decisions or feel less alone. And as always, the commitment here is to walk beside you calmly, clearly, and with genuine care as more updates continue to unfold in the days and weeks ahead. Stay informed about what is happening with this program, stay safe and protected from scams that target seniors, and take good care of yourself and your health.